lunch and learn on responsible foraging. I'm so excited for this. My name's Emily Becker, and I'm with the Rural Cap Grow program. This is our last in our lunch and learn series, and probably the one I've been looking forward to the most. And I'm so excited to hear from our guest speakers and panelists. We have 4 wonderful people here, but I can see even on the call, there's just an incredible number of people that have a lot of knowledge around this topic, and I'm hoping we can have a really great discussion about it. So before I introduce our panelists, I'll let Sinead, my colleague, introduce to you a little bit about Rural Cap Grow.
Hi, my name's Sinead. I'm calling in from Lower Tanana DNA Lands in Fairbanks, and I'm 1/3 of the Grow team, which is me, Emily, and Iva, who isn't here today. But the Grow program is a program that was funded through the CARES Act, and Rural Cap got funding to pretty much start this program, where we've been able to fund 10 different food security related projects across the state in rural communities. And we've also been doing these lunch and learns alongside of our main projects. And it's been really great so far. And this is the last of our webinar. And
And also a huge thanks to Gina Dion from the Cooperative Extension Service for doing our Zooms and jockeying all this stuff. We so appreciate you and all the work that you do. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm just going to do a brief introduction because our star panelist, Naomi Michalsen, has to leave here in just a little bit. And we're really excited to have her here. She's Tlingit from Ketchikan. She is a teacher and consultant and author of a new guide on respectful harvesting guidelines, and that's just one of the many hats that she wears. I'll let you introduce yourself more. We also have Julie Rowland. She's here in Anchorage on Dena'ina land. She's originally from the East Coast, but she has been foraging for a long time and running around through the woods having a good time. And she's going to share some of her experiences as well. We have Sundance Vissar, who is working on an MBA in sustainable organizations. She is in Homer at this time and also wears a lot of different hats, working on a variety of things. And I should say Naomi, Julie, and Sundance have all participated in, as students, the UAF ethnobotany program. And I know we have Eyes here who is going to maybe, hopefully if we have a chance, tell us more about that really wonderful program. It's something that's connected all of us and helped us to grow in our knowledge and relationship with plants. And then finally, we have Celia Denton. She's Tsimshian. She is going to tell us about her experiences in becoming a forager. And I know it's a very brief introduction. I'm looking forward to you telling us more about yourselves as we go along and hearing from our other participants as well with questions. So Naomi, I'm going to ask you to go first because I know you are pressed for time here. Welcome.
Okay, Gunak Chish, thank you for the introduction, and so excited to be here with all of you today. I'm also, it was so nice to see so many of you that I haven't seen in a while, and some new faces as well. But yes, I participated and graduated with as part of the UAF ethnobotany program, which is amazing. I'm so happy to hear that it's still operating, and just really excited. I live in Ketchikan, which is home of the Tontiquan and Sonyaquan Tlingit people. I'm currently in Anchorage right now on Dena'ina land. My niece is graduating today, so I'm sorry I have to leave so quickly today, but I'm so happy to be a part of this. So many things to talk about. Let's see. Kase yuchat duasak, chak chat nahatsati, wishkitan ayachat. My Tlingit name is Kase, and my family is from Berners Bay area, which is out of Juneau originally, and I'm Wishkitan and Eagle Shark from the Shark House, so Tushit. And let's see, I have a little bit about myself. I have 5 adult children and 9 grandchildren. And I've been able to live in several different places in Alaska growing up. And so just really love this place we live in. I feel so thankful and blessed to have spent some time in different areas of the state, and love our indigenous cultures and the people from this place, and can never stop learning and connecting. And so one of the things that I was sharing with you today is a short document that was developed last year called the Respectful Harvesting Guidelines. And it was developed because well, it was developed through the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous People. And it was a small grant that I received to help with a project that I had in mind, and that was to get Indigenous women around the state together to talk about some of the things that we really care about. And this was one of them for sure. And even though we live in different areas in the state, in different regions, we might have different plants, different languages, and different cultures, different backgrounds. We came up with this kind of a starting point. And it's definitely not an end all or anything like that. But we hope that it would be something that people can use as a starting point to have dialogue around, to share with other people, to use as a template, or to, change, or not even to use at all. But I think for a lot of us, we don't talk about some of these things. And so it's really is a big part of who we are as Indigenous people, or who I am, as far as connecting to this land. And, my belief is that when we learn about the people of this place and the plants who we believe are our relatives, and that we're all connected, that the more we learn about them and the more we use them and share them and take care of them, the more likely we are to able to protect them. And then sustainability is actually kind of a natural thing. So there were some women that were from different areas of the state, and I see Tia is on here. She is one of our amazing Kayani sisters, and Kayani is a Tlingit word. It means the spirit of plants, or blossom, or leaves. And so it's a small group of women, and it's growing, and we're excited to. We just got funded again this year, so we're not sure what we're doing yet this year, but it'll be around this area. And so so they are Eva Burke and the Minyana Fairbanks area, and Louise Brady is from Sitka, and Trixie Bennett is Ketchikan. And I should say, let's see, Tia Holly, she is living in Soldotna, and Gloria Simeon from Bethel, and Disney Williams from Juneau. And yeah, I think that I'm so glad that you are all having this conversation. And, and I think that's the work, is to really think about what it is that, why we're doing what we do, and what our purpose is. And it's stemming from, coming from a place of harm, where we see, like for myself, examples of what I've seen are foods that we can't access anymore. They've been overfished, overharvested, or we're not able to access them because it costs a lot for permits, or all sorts of different reasons. But or they're just not. There's a lot of. It's very complicated, but I think that it's really helping to. The conversations are so wonderful, and also, what we're finding is that a lot of the conversations are mostly women, and not all, but mostly women. And I think that that's also it goes along well with our cultures, which most in Tlingit, it's matrilineal. And so we follow our mother's side. So many of our voices have been oppressed or because of different systems that we've grown up in, we haven't always had a voice. And so part of this is very healing as well, to kind of learn about the history, learn about this place. And I'd like to just read part of this. I know you have the document, and so I won't read the whole thing, but I'd just like to read a little bit just to kind of set the tone for, maybe your conversation. And I won't read the whole letter, but it's the letter that kind of introduces the guidelines. And so it says, we hope that in following these guidelines, we can maintain for the next 7 generations the land on which we live and the foods and plants that sustain us. We also hope that local tribes, schools, communities, businesses, and individuals will use these guidelines as a starting point for developing additional practices needed to sustain our lands and peoples. We believe that everything is connected and that we are interconnected with the plants, lands, and each other. By further developing ways of protecting our resources, we are also healing ourselves and our lands. Social justice, equity, and food sovereignty are also connected. And many individuals currently living in Alaskan communities no longer have access to their traditional foods and plants. This lack of access contributes to poverty, inequity, and a wide variety of social issues. By sharing the importance of maintaining and strengthening connections with our cultures, local plants and foods, and the importance of preserving our lands and resources, we believe it is an act of love and healing from the effects of colonization and violence against our peoples. We believe plants are our teachers. By learning about them, preserving them, respecting them in the ways we go about gathering and harvesting, we are leaving behind a legacy for the next generations. The indigenous wisdom and teachings about our connections to our lands and resources is important for all. By working together to better understand, preserve, and respect our local resources, we are creating a better world and learning how to honor one another. Our goal is that these guidelines encourage you to engage with your own local and cultural plant traditions. We believe that precious knowledge, wisdom, and medicine exist within each of us and all around us. Our gift of these guidelines is meant to encourage thoughtful discussion, honesty, and hard work to help solve the issues of inequity and develop a more sustainable way to preserve and care for our resources. And then there's the list, kind of a bullet list. And I think it's important that we felt it was important that we started off with build a deeper understanding and connection to the people on whose land you are harvesting. And so I think what's missing in a lot of guidelines or books around plants is the spiritual aspect of our relationship to this place. And so, and I think I'll end with a little powerful quote from one of my mentors, Rita Blumenstein. And I really love this. And this is also on the guidelines document. And so it's free. This is a free thing that you can use again and share. So Rita Blumenstein says that we are free to be who we are, to create our own life out of the past and out of the present. We are our ancestors. When we can heal ourselves, we also heal our ancestors, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, and our children. When we heal ourselves, we heal Mother Earth. So, Gunakchish, and thank you for inviting me here today. And I look forward to connecting with more of you soon in the future. And I have a few minutes just to stick around. And I apologize that I have to leave so early today.
We're so grateful for you being here and also for this gift of these guidelines. I do feel like they have really been needed. And I'm gonna just ask our other panelists if you'd like to chime in on anything you heard, something that you feel you'd like to express.
I can chime in. This is Sundance. Thank you so much for being here and sharing that. I finished the ethnobotany program in 2021, and I was definitely thinking a lot about how something like the document you shared was really needed. And so I was just thrilled to see that copy show up in my inbox, and it really, yeah, so thank you so much.
Gonna choose.
All right, I'm gonna kind of go down my agenda here, and my next on my list was, I was hoping, Celia, you're ready to talk about how you became a forager. You know, I think that a lot of us are maybe interested in starting, or maybe we already are and we'd like to develop our skills further. Just maybe tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to know plants.
Yeah, first want to say thank you directly to Naomi for sharing that. It's just, it feels so grounding and like a sigh of relief to hear those words and connecting to each other in that way. So I guess it's funny. I feel really honored to be in this space. First of all, super grateful. It feels funny to like use the term hobby, but I don't know how else to like say what this is. I guess my relation to plant relatives has been something that's been entwined in my life since I could remember, but it's come in different waves. And where I'm at right now is very much learning and beginning stage, although I would say I started intentionally foraging maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And when I say intentionally, I mean, I think we're all aware of people in our lives, whether we actively forage or not, who go out and do it and harvest from the lands in whatever capacity that means. And I had always known that and seen that and admired it. And about 5 years ago is when I reached out to someone I knew who was knowledgeable to take me out on the land and just share with me what they knew about like 1 or 2 plants. And I will say that that whole learning process was kind of fumbling because at the time I didn't have the awareness of how much was too much of taking. And that first year was like, I feel sad to say, but it's like that first year I definitely took more than I needed because I got too excited. And so the year after that was realizing that and owning that and trying to understand, okay, so how much is too much? Or if I feel like I'm taking too much, how do I share that? And so I would say the whole process is kind of engaging more with community, like understanding who knows what about which plants, who is interested in engaging more with that plant. Like the more I talk about it, the more I have friends or family who are like, I've not had fiddleheads before. And I'm like, oh, well, I have abundant fiddleheads, so I can share that with you. And it just keeps growing and growing each year. And I think the more we have conversations like this and are connecting and are knowing who knows what about what, because it's impossible to like know everything about everything. It's just a slow connecting process, and it's been really fulfilling. And it's like I can feel my heart growing as the knowledge is growing. And I'm kind of rambling a little bit right now. I don't know if there's a more focused point you would like me to touch on, but that's kind of where I'm at with my learning process.
No, I think that's wonderful. I think the idea of, starting small and like getting to know one plant and, going out with a teacher that can help you, and then growing over time, because yeah, you can't learn, you can't, develop that deep relationship with every plant, immediately. Yeah, Sundancer, Julie, do you want to comment on that too?
I think what Celia said about just feeling her heart expanding as she learns more about plants really resonated with me. I fell in love with living here through getting to know who lived here, be it the people, the animals, the plants. And so I find that the more knowledge I'm able to build and the more I'm able to harvest and share medicinal and edible plants, I fall a little bit more in love. And this time of year is just so, I can't help but just smile everywhere I go, because I can smell the cottonwood in the air, and I can find fiddleheads, and I see signs of life coming up. And it's just such a wonderful feeling to know how connected I am, and that some of the food that nourishes me in so many ways just comes directly from the land that I'm living on.
Yeah, I second that. I got to know Alaska through the plants and people as well. I've been here since 2006. And one thing that I was thinking about when Naomi was talking, but it took me too long to formulate my thought, was that as more people are out foraging, if we have information like this or conversations like we're having now, or that document, with more and more people out on the land, instead of over harvesting problems, we could have more connections and more relationships and care for the land, and it could be could build on to something positive.
Yeah, I agree. I was recently out at Kincaid Park and seeing people out there collecting fiddleheads, and I think it's really, a wonderful thing. I think, and depending on where we live, we just need to keep talking about it and having some conversations so that it is a positive thing, and that, we're not looking at over harvesting issues. So I suppose that's a good segue. Julie, you had some experience and about, experiencing some issues with over harvesting, and maybe some warning signs that we could look out for.
Certainly, yeah. So I have some pictures just as a guide that I can share.
Gina, did
oh,
you?
no, I can't.
Yeah, okay.
That's okay.
Gina, if you could make Julie a co-host.
You should be good to go now.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yes, great. Thank you. So I actually got to go out just on Sunday and collect fiddleheads for the first time this season, which was just wonderful. Fiddleheads are probably the first plant that I felt really confident and comfortable in harvesting. And so they just really have a special place in my heart. So every year they're usually the first thing that I forage, and it's just a sign that winter is over for me. And so there was 2 years ago, so the year that I think a lot of folks started on their foraging journeys in whatever capacity in Anchorage, due to all of us being so isolated and stuck at home. I went out to a spot that I've been foraging in Anchorage for several years now, and I found it completely cut down. So every single fiddlehead for acres of woods was removed. And you can probably see here that the little nubs of the fiddleheads were completely removed. And so it was pretty devastating to see. I think that I had to really collect myself, and I cried for a bit because this entire woods were absolutely decimated. And I think it's apparent, but it might not be, that these ferns were not going to be growing the next year. And if the ferns couldn't come back, I think it's possible that it would take several years for them to come back. So ferns spread through their rhizomes, which are the conical roots that grow underneath. And if you overharvest fiddleheads or just ferns in general, it can lead to root exhaustion. And so that entire area of ferns can be completely decimated and may not be able to return for several years, may not be able to return, period. There's not a ton of research on it, but we do know that it can take them a while to be able to come back. And so I am planning on going back to that spot in a couple of weeks just to check on it. I'm certainly not going to be harvesting from there because I think it needs quite some time to recuperate, regardless of what it looks like. And it was just pretty devastating to see. I will say that oftentimes where I harvest, there's absolutely no signs that anybody else is foraging there, which is, I think, great. But this year, one of the spots that I typically harvest fiddleheads in, there were some signs that someone else had been there, but they had really responsibly harvested the fiddleheads, which was exciting to see. Somebody else getting in there and sharing in plant love, but also doing it in a really responsible way. And so when I say a responsible way for fiddleheads, for me, that means of a clump of fiddleheads, so anywhere from 10 to 12 fiddleheads. Oftentimes I'll just take 2. And so there are some folks that say you can take 1, leave 3. I usually do a bit less than that just to be safe. You can hear my dog barking. But that was exactly the rule that the other person that had gotten to that particular spot in the woods had done as well. They had taken 1 or 2 from each clump. And it just makes me feel great to know that that particular area in a couple months will be absolutely full of ferns and just beautiful and lush. And also that that particular area will keep coming back and being really sustainable.
Great, thank you so much. Are there, this is a good, actually, kind of we're halfway through our time. Are there questions or comments from anyone? Please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat if you do.
Julie, I think it's so neat you have been going back to the same place. Like that's part of building these relationships. Have you done that with other plants or places?
Yes, so I typically, whenever I'm out, I just kind of look around and see what plants are around, whether it's things that I use as food or medicinally, or just in general. I like to kind of place myself, but I would say that the main other ones are spots that I go for berries, spots that I find things like plantain or jaithluck that are medicinal. And I think you're exactly right, Sundance. It's a part of placing yourself and getting to know where you are and building a relationship with the land. And I kind of think of it as cultivating, and not that I think that it needs me to survive by any means, but these little spots that are so important to me. When I return to them every year, I get to see how they're doing and make sure that things are going well and making sure that I'm not having an impact on them and that they're still thriving.
So Julie, Aaron asked a question, will the foraged fiddleheads grow back in the same year?
So they won't turn into ferns within the same year. If you've taken the fiddlehead, it won't be able to unfurl and grow into a fern. But as long as you've only removed a few from the clump, it doesn't really impact the capacity for them to keep coming back year after year. Because so ferns spread by rhizomes, but they also have spores on the fern itself. And so as long as you're not removing that much of the growth, it can continue to grow.
Yeah, I don't think I said where I'm at. I'm not sure. I can't remember. So I'm located in Anchorage right now, and I had lived here for 10 years before moving to Juneau at the beginning of the pandemic, and now I'm back in Anchorage again. And I recall, and I'm not sure if any of you had noticed this, but once the pandemic started, I noticed this big increase in interest of other folks foraging. And so those places that I had been going year after year after I started, I was noticing were more trafficked. And so the summer of 2020, I went and visited back to those spaces, but felt like they were already taken from a lot. So I didn't really do much that year. It was more like going to those spaces and assessing. And then I've been in Juneau since then. So this year I'm actually, this week specifically, I'm like, I'm not sure where I'm going to go. Like it's this next step of the learning process, right? Where I'm like, all right, folks have found those other spaces. Where do I need to be looking now that might be an okay space for me to be in relation to? But yeah, I don't know if you all noticed that pattern as well.
I definitely have, and especially with mushrooms in the fall. I feel like, you know, a lot of trails now are really well harvested, and I think that's why, you know, the responsible foraging guidelines that they've just published are really important for us to, you know, get out there and just again tell, you know, with our networks, having conversations about that for sure. And I guess I also, you know, when I was at Kincaid this weekend, you know, looking at some of the fiddleheads, I was like, this is not the place for me to take these, you know, like there's so many nettles, and nettles are everywhere. Like, you know, I could take, you know, any, like 1,000 people could come and get nettles at Kincaid and there would still be plenty and they grow back just fine. That, you know, knowing that, okay, there's plants that are really appropriate for me and plants that maybe I should leave alone.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think. I don't know if this is the space to like air this idea, but it is a thought. And I feel like we're community connecting right now is like, sometimes there are these really wonderful resources and they tend to be passed around within a community that's already established or within social media. And sometimes people just dipping their toes into learning how to do it might not be connected to those spaces. And so I've thought that like, this would be a big project, and I've talked to some people about it already, but like maybe connecting that information or those resources to the places that tend to be popular for certain things. Like if there's a trail that seems to be very trafficked for fiddleheads, perhaps there could be a resource at the trailhead about like mindful foraging in the same way that there's like warning about how to be bear safe in those spaces too. I feel like it would take a lot of collective community effort to make a project like that move forward, but I kind of wanted to share it in this space in case anyone else had had that thought.
Absolutely. I've been thinking about that. And, you know, I think, again, with these guidelines, I think moving forward with some groups like maybe the Anchorage Park Foundation, you know, I think they would be totally into that and maybe helping. So this is great that we're making some of these connections. Maybe we can work on a project like that. And let's see. I know I see someone in the chat here. Can someone discuss the appropriateness of moving traditional plants to home gardens or other areas? Oh, this is a good one. I'm concerned since this is not what is traditionally viewed as okay, and I've heard of people wanting to do this. So moving plants out of the wild into your home gardens. This is a really great question. I know we've talked a lot about that. And then, are there efforts to have new harvesters participate in ceremonies before harvesting, for instance, first feed feasts? Do any of you want to, that's kind of a two-part question. Would any of you like to tackle that one? I don't know, Lisa, if you can answer, if you are in the car or on the phone, but, or really any of you, because you know, we have Eva Burke here and all these people I'm always hoping to learn more from. Moving plants from the wild into your home gardens. Does anybody want to talk about that?
Hi, this is Lisa, and we have a project related to that, but I would very much appreciate an Alaska Native person's perspective on that project. So Eva, if you'd be up for sharing your thoughts, that'll be very much appreciated. Thank you.
I can. I was doing the indigenous pause, waiting to see if other people wanted to step in. I know she traditional. I'm not looking why I'm video. So I guess my answer is it makes a lot to do that. As long as the plant is a project that might not suitable for this blueberries, that's hard to transplant. Berries, on the other hand, are pretty easy to transplant. Labrador tea is pretty easy to transplant. There are certain plants that you call different. That's just like when you're doing your own, you take that I'm trying to discover. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was saying that some plants are they're better suited for cultivation and propagation in your home garden. So like raspberries are an easy one. Labrador tea is another easy one. I know that Tia Holly does have a project like this and is, so I know that she's okay with it. And I think it makes sense too, especially when you're thinking about elders and making a, like say you want to make garden boxes for elders. I think any way that you can incorporate traditional plants or foods into your garden space is, it's like a whole foods approach, right? Or a whole systems approach. And so I think personally I'm okay for it, as long as that when you're taking the cutting off the raspberry, that you're not killing that whole raspberry bush. You're just taking enough to make the raspberry, to allow the raspberry to grow in a new home. So that part, this state has like really technical guidelines on how to harvest, but I still think that a lot of people don't follow them, especially after hearing you. And yeah, see, that's what I was saying, that my personal opinion, and some people are doing it. So I think there are mixed feelings about that. So yeah, that's why I'd say it's really a personal thing, I think.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment on that?
Hi, I would like to. I think that I do agree with a lot of what Ava said, but I also think that it depends on what you are transplanting it for as well. Like if you are transplanting, for example, something as precious as Devil's Club to replant it, and it's very sacred here, I feel then, and if you're like commercializing it and it's not your culture, and then cultural appropriation comes into play, then of course that is like wrong. But transplanting can be very helpful, especially if you are harvesting something like raspberry, for example. You're no longer having to harvest it from the wild, so you're able to have it at your home, and you can offer harvesting in your home, in your space too, and provide things to your community. So yeah, I think that it really depends on your intention, especially and how sacred that plant is, and if the transplanting is also like you're helping to restore something, like if you have land, for example, and you want to help to restore something that indigenously already grows in that area.
Thank you, Eyes. That's really, really good point. Anybody else? Yeah, thank you, Eva. Consulting a local elder is always the best possible way to go. And before I forget, I know Irene had asked a question about favorite resources for foraging. Like if you have books, maybe your favorite book, maybe you could drop that in the chat, and that would, we can make a list of our favorites. And related to that, I think Sundance, I'll turn it over to you. I know you're going to show us some of your favorite online resources, things that we can learn from.
Yeah, I will do that. I'm gonna share a portion of my screen. So
Oh, Gina, Sundance needs to be made a co-host.
yeah, part of the ethnobotany program for me was just learning about just how many resources are available. And I had started bookmarking them in my browser and had this whole folder. And when I pulled it up the other day to try to get some together for this talk, had like 30 tabs, and one of them was Naomi's organization. And I didn't even put that together. So I was happy to look at her new and improved website.
You should be good to go to share.
Okay. All right, that will work for now. So I just, in order to introduce myself, I just wanted to share this family picture. Here is my paternal grandfather with his haul of morel mushrooms. I grew up in Iowa. That's where most of my family is. And my grandpa was injured in a work accident as a very young man and lost his arms. And I've always been inspired by him. And he, this time of year, was always in the woods walking around picking mushrooms and leaving them with friends and family and neighbors. And in the middle is my littlest cousin, and that picture was taken probably 10 years ago, but he also likes to go out. My dad took that picture and sent it to me because I was in Alaska. And then another, just a funny meme to share with all you plant folks. I think that I'm really interested in how people pass around information. And I sort of started thinking more about that at the beginning of the pandemic, when I started hearing about some of the damage at trailheads, or just people not knowing how to recreate sustainably. And along with that were overharvest concerns, and just wondering how, especially in the absence of these human connections at the beginning of the pandemic, especially, just how were people connecting with each other and able to learn these things. And I still am, and I love the idea of having extra interpretive information at trailheads about foraging. That sort of thing is definitely something I'm interested in. I was going to share a tool that we looked at in the ethnobotany program ethical wildcrafting course, and it's been a number of years since I took that class. So I went back into my notes, and one of the tools we used was the United Plant Savers species at risk assessment tool. And I know this is probably really small. It's just a screenshot of a spreadsheet, but the point of it is to have a number of people, like it's a little bit objective because you're going in and you're thinking about like how is these different characteristics, how vulnerable are they? Do they make the plant, like if it the way it's propagated, the way it's harvested, the way any threats to its range, just I mean there's like 20 categories, and you go down and you give it a score, and higher scores are more at risk. And I think the idea was to get a lot of information like this, just to try to see where, which plants were at risk and needed more focus on to learn about. And this is an example from, I think everyone in the class wrote up their form for Devil's Club. And when I look at it now, I think my interpretation back then was probably a bit low. But yeah, so in filling out a form like this, one of the things that we realized as a class was that you have to learn a lot about the plant, and like there's so many resources out there, and maybe some of them are more, depending on the background where the information comes from, it's something you want to incorporate or not. So just a few of the websites that we would reference or I would look at for plant information, like I always forget what the acronym stands for, but this is GBIF. It's the Global Biodiversity something information facility. And so I put cloudberry or salmonberry, Rufus camemoris in there, and you can see it like spans the whole northern the Arctic region. But that one is dependent upon people putting their information in. That database draws from museum collections and also from sites like iNaturalist. And so you can see when you zoom in on Alaska, there's a lot in the Anchorage, Kenai Peninsula area, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where that plant is abundant. It just means that's where there are instances shared online in these databases. So, so there's these tools, but you sort of have to think about where they get their information too. So, yeah, again, here's just a little brief screenshot of 8 different websites that have useful information for learning about these plants. And it doesn't replace having these conversations, but it can be a place to start, especially if you're at home with COVID like I am today. So yeah, I guess that's what I have. I'll stop sharing for now.
Awesome. And Irene, I hope some of those are helpful to your question about resources that you can use. And are there other questions or comments? So Eyes, I might call on you. I would love to hear or would you like to tell us about the UAF ethnobotany program that you are helping with now?
Hi, yes, I would love to. Hi. I also have my little one here. So
yes, Charlie.
Yes, my little one's name is Charlie. But so the UAF ethnobotany program, I began as a student, I think last summer, if I'm not mistaken, and it's 17 credit program. So there was an occupational endorsement. Let me back up. So we had an occupational endorsement that's 17 credits, but now this coming fall, we're going to be bringing in an Associates of Applied Science. So that's really exciting. But I started as a student in the summer, and it really revitalized my my love for school and like learning, because I think sometimes, you know, college can be hard for students. And if you have like, you're a non-traditional student, especially, you really need a different setup and different understanding in your classroom in general. So when the program was canceled before I became a student, but it out of nowhere became a thing again. And to my surprise, I was able to apply for it. And it just really brought like love back into my life. Exactly, like my relationship with plants grew, and understanding them and understanding leaf margins and just plant venation. There's just so many technical things that you can learn in ethnobotany that gives you a very rich and full understanding of plants as a plant lover. And I think that it really made me feel so much more sophisticated in describing plants. And I don't remember exactly who said this earlier, but I know someone, maybe it was Sundance, maybe talked about starting small and working your way up. So as a student, I studied the aster family, and it's the largest family of wildflowers. It's called the Asteraceae family, I believe, technically. And you learn all of those things like plant family pronunciation, which is really exciting. And just so much about plants that you didn't know before, which herbs are related, because ethnobotany is not a specific study of a certain kind of plant. So it's not the study of useful plants, and it's not the study of medicinal plants. It's the study of plant and human relationships as they have been applied. So it spans from learning about just different ways that people have used plants, from basket making. We did have a student make a basket in one of the semesters. I personally had to do projects that I could incorporate my little one in. So that's another thing that I liked about being a student, was that it was accessible, and it encouraged like and acknowledged like child relationships in plant and plant use. And one of the things that I was able to learn too is that women handle the most diverse plant matter, and that's because of situations in economics and availability of labor. And there's just so many facts that you learn. It's a very rich and well-rounded program. And I started working for the EBOT program because I just loved it so much that I wanted to recruit students, because I was just like, I need to tell more people about this, because like to some of the points earlier, having more people understand plants just puts more people out there to be able to monitor things like overharvesting and overuse and just misuses of plants. And people being stewards of the earth is so important, because it's the only one that we have. Yes, honey. Just get down. You just got to get down, honey. I'm sorry. My kid is climbing something. I'm going to take you guys with me so that I can help her. But so yeah, I started working for the EBOT program, doing recruitment, and I'm now the program assistant. But I started just as a student, and before I became a student was just a plant lover who I didn't actually know, as I knew a lot about plants in terms of their names, and like I'd read books, but it really helped me to become so much more well-rounded and knowledgeable and active in the way that I think about plants, the kind of plants that I learned about too. One of them being Devil's Club, and me learning that it was a precious plant helped me to avoid harvesting it, because I know nothing about it. It's not in my culture to harvest or use that plant, you know? So it's like, and then when I'm able to talk to other people, I get to share the information that I learned with them. Like Labrador tea is another plant, for example, that's really precious here. So it's just like, you learn about so many different cultures that utilize plants in different ways, and you read a lot of articles. Lisa, one of the core instructors, is really amazing, and she really is the reason why I am a student right now. I just have to say that like outright, I would not be a student if it wasn't for EBOT, because EBOT had the funding to help their students, like they have scholarships available, especially for Indigenous students. So they were able to like really help me get back into college and to find a path that made me feel like I was doing something useful, because I do study psychology, but I don't like just working with people. I really like the plant part of working with people. Like I like making tinctures with people and, you know, doing research with people about plants. I like to talk about plants, like that meme was saying earlier. So yeah, I think that plants are a really good way to connect, and ethnobotany really just helped me solidify deeper connections with people and understanding like my elders more. And it's just, yeah, just a well-rounded, beautiful program. Yes, honey. Yes.
I want to mommy.
Okay. Sorry, I have to go be a mom now, but
Guys, I
yeah,
totally agree with you. It's been really fun being in the class this spring, and I'm looking forward to taking more. And I agree with you. It's been really like life enriching. I don't know any other way to describe it. Just really, just very fulfilling. So this is our, you know, our last lunch and learn, but we're going to be continuing with some webinars, and our next series is going to be Cooking with Alaska Grown. And we're super excited. We have some really amazing Alaska Native chefs, or not necessarily chefs, but you know, people who cook with foraged and Alaska grown and how they prepare it. So if you are not on our regular email list, actually, let me put this in the chat. Oops. If you don't normally get our emails, hopefully you can use this sign up form. That's it. Okay. And you can get our Grow program emails, and we'll make sure to let you know when the next webinar series begins.